Story 1. My ex used to always say, "This is why no one likes you," whenever he was mad at me. I think that's a rotten thing to say to your significant other. Story 2. Always playing devil's advocate or extending grace to others in situations where your spouse is clearly being treated wrongly. A friend of the family ended up divorced, and it was one of the signs I always noticed that things were not as happy as they tried to make them seem. Anytime someone was rude to the wife, the husband made excuses and rationalized that she must have done something to cause that behavior. The same happened during disagreements. The husband would overwhelm the wife and took pleasure in seeing her become increasingly uncomfortable, even when discussing inconsequential things like whether or not a movie was good. I do not know if I am explaining it correctly or using the right terminology, but that behavior is toxic. Story 3. Making fun of something your spouse is into, seriously making fun of it. If you and your spouse have a dynamic where you both enjoy gentle teasing, then that is different. Story 4. It is not lack of love that damages marriage but lack of respect. Story 5. If your friend has a newborn at home and his availability to go out for drinks with friends has not changed, your friend is a horrible spouse. Story 6. Constantly joking at your spouse's expense, teasing them, but never offering real compliments or affection. Story 7. Making decisions for both of you without consulting them. Walking ahead of them and never checking if they are even still with you. Leaving all house cleaning to them. Leaving all childcare to them. Story 8. Dismissing concerns or turning any communication about feelings into how it hurts your feelings. Not supporting your partner or speaking negatively about them behind their back for validation. Approaching issues by trying to win instead of facing the problem as a team. Failing to communicate concerns or feelings, leading to resentment and disrespect. Story 9. Aside from the obvious, making jokes in public at your spouse's expense, such as ball and chain or idiot man-child jokes, suggests that you either dislike your spouse or are trying too hard to fit in. Story 10. Blaming something that is happening on your spouse, especially when that spouse is in a vulnerable position, such as just experiencing a loss in the family or being pregnant, is unfair. I knew a man who would pick fights with his spouse and then say it all started because she was pregnant and very emotional. Honestly, even if it was true, why would you blame your spouse like that? Needless to say, we are no longer friends. Story 11. You do not know the names of any of your children's teachers, doctors, friends, or interests. You put your spouse down in a joking manner in front of others. You actively try to make sure your spouse never gets to do any pleasurable activity that does not include you, such as hobbies. You are jealous and seek to control your partner. You allow your partner to carry the whole household chores, and when you do something, you frame it as helping your spouse or doing them a favor. Story 12. Being selfish, disrespectful, and not doing your share of the work. Story 13. A sarcastic, passive-aggressive spouse during an argument. Story 14. Fighting to win instead of discussing to resolve and overcome. Story 15. A spouse who looks for the lowest blows when you are arguing. Story 16. Once I was driving a married couple I knew to the airport, and the wife said, "I think I just saw a monkey running on the side of the road." The husband lost his mind and screamed at her, "There are no monkeys in Maryland. Are you stupid?" He is an example of a horrible spouse. Story 17. When one spouse is generally rude to the other, any request becomes more of a demand. For example, when they lose keys, it automatically becomes the other spouse's problem as well. Story 18. Families out to dinner where the mother is juggling children and unable to eat her own food while the father plays on his phone. Story 19. The usual behaviors of cheating, lying, and disrespect. But the underlying threads are conflict avoidance, dismissal of the partner's feelings to avoid difficult discussions, inability to process and overcome issues without turning the focus onto their own emotions and making every issue about themselves, and lack of accountability for how their actions impact their partner regardless of intentions. This reflects a lack of emotional intelligence. Discussing relationship issues with anyone other than their partner without attempting to resolve them together. Speaking negatively about their partner to others, effectively isolating their partner from mutual family and friends in the process. or putting friends and family in a difficult position where they have to offer advice or choose a side without the full picture. Anything that consistently delays conflict resolution and builds resentment does not equate to being a good spouse. While there are always nuances, if these behaviors are constant or common, they usually take more from relationships than they add. Story 20. I wouldn't be with you if I thought you were stupid. He proceeds to call me stupid every single day, telling me everything I like is dumb, including my parents and all my pets. He claims to be the smartest person ever and says he knows how to do everything. He spent 5 years in South Korea and knows more about Korea than my mom, who was born there and lived there for 20 years. He says he's afraid to let my mom dog sit because she might harm our dogs. Ex-husband. Story 21. Anytime your spouse wants to talk about their emotions, you respond with, "I am not your therapist." Story 22. Emotional hijacking occurs when the first spouse has a grievance or wants to set a boundary, and the other person shuts down because it made them feel a certain way. As a result, the conversation is no longer about the first spouse. The first person is usually left trying to make amends but has never truly processed their original emotion. A harmful behavior in relationships is using the children as pawns. Regardless of which parent is at fault during a dispute, traumatizing the children is never justified. Story 23. Systematically separating a spouse from hobbies or friends. I see this too often in relationships. They brainwash the partner into thinking it is necessary to do this to be a good spouse or parent. This usually comes from the side of the relationship where the person does not engage in hobbies or stay in touch with friends, if they have any. Because they lack these connections, they try to pull the other person down. These are often the people who show the biggest changes after divorce. You see them improve significantly because they are once again doing things that bring them joy and letting joyful people back into their life. Story 24. Constantly forgetting important things in the relationship like allergies, juicy stories confided in you, anniversaries, or birthdays. Being forgetful is one thing, but if you keep spacing on it, it shows you are not putting in the effort or care. Story 25. Leaving your wife at home alone with 3 to 4 children, a postpartum dog, and 12-hour-old newborn puppies to go out for a leisure activity. Story 26. Texting your work crush every day and neglecting to tell them you have a live-in girlfriend already since she only exists when it is convenient for you. Story 27. Not wanting to make changes such as seeing a therapist, planning date nights, or spicing up your sex life because you believe your spouse will never leave you. Story 28. Using information shared in confidence as ammunition during arguments. My ex would use things I had told him about my parents' untreated mental illness to wound me during fights if he was losing the upper hand. Story 29. My head chef's boyfriend walked through the back door of the restaurant and came into the kitchen screaming in the middle of the Friday night rush because she did not answer her phone when he called. He was asking when she would be off work, from what I could tell. Story 30. Having no qualms about insulting or demeaning your spouse in front of others. A friend in high school's father told her mother, "Shut up, Kathy, you don't know what you're talking about." In front of me, my parents, my friend, and her little sister. My parents and I were shocked, but my friend and her sister did not react, as if that was a completely normal interaction for their parents. Story 31. If they think that their unusual fascinations or hobbies are weird, not cool, or embarrassing, it is always problematic when one partner dislikes the other partner's hobbies. Note: this does not include hobbies that cause resentment because the spouse ignores their partner for long periods of time or spends significant shared money that both need on the hobby. Story 32. They speak negatively about their spouse to others when their spouse is not present. Story 33. Lazy, complains about everything, including not being able to stop what you are doing immediately to do what she wants. She takes offense to even a minor change in tone before clearing her throat. When called out on it, she throws a fit and tells people to leave her alone. This is after years of being off hard drugs. Story 34. Fathers who say they are babysitting when they have to watch their children. It is likely that this means they are not fully contributing as a partner. Story 35. Financial abuse. Any type of abuse is terrible, but this one is much more common and accepted as normal than many people realize. Story 36. Flirting with other people in front of them is often dismissed as harmless fun, with others told to stop being so sensitive. This behavior is extremely disrespectful. If the roles were reversed to prove a point, they would react very strongly. Story 37. Going on vacation without your partner and your children, and then not allowing your partner to have a break from the children and go on their own vacation. Story 38. Leaving all responsibilities and stressors for your spouse to carry alone. Making your spouse feel unworthy of basic care and safety. Cheating on your spouse. Telling your family that you are walking on eggshells around your spouse and it is really hard for you when in reality she is grieving, crying often, in deep pain, and taking protective distance because you cheated on her. Saying things like, "If I faced the reality of the harm and pain I have caused you, I would probably kill myself, so that is why I do not face it." Flirting with other women in front of your spouse and then gaslighting them about it instead of changing your behavior. Hearing your spouse say, "I am really not okay today. I feel so hurt and alone," and then responding with, "Do you want to clean my van?" as a joke. Holding your spouse during sex while they try to reach for a condom and saying, "I want to get you pregnant," and not letting them go when they say no. Hearing your spouse vulnerably share how they were sexually assaulted repeatedly as a child and responding with, "But was it really that bad?" Telling your spouse how you would kill them. I could go on, but I will not. I think you get the point. He is a very bad person. Story 39. Making snide remarks masked as jokes about your spouse in front of others is harmful. My father does this to my mother all the time. No one ever thinks it is funny. People who behave that way are often incapable of discussing grievances with their partner in a direct or respectful manner, so they resort to public humiliation through passive aggression instead. It is foul. Story 40. If they are already making unkind jokes about "this one finally trapped me" before you even get married, they are likely to be a bad spouse. Story 41. Ditching your first foreign wife for a younger woman and then burying her on a golf course. Cheating on your first foreign wife with your second foreign wife. Cheating on your second foreign wife with your third foreign wife. Cheating on your third foreign wife with a porn star. Cheating on all three wives by committing child abuse. Story 42. I have heard a lot of criticism of the spouse who finally voices resentment and contempt toward the other spouse, but no one stops to consider what it took to reach that point. I always notice the non-stressed spouse is usually the problem because they push all the difficult issues off their plate and then seem genuinely confused as to why their partner is so fed up with them. Sometimes being passive is also a form of abuse. Story 43. Yelling loudly, insulting, and name-calling your spouse during disagreements is toxic. I just experienced this, unfortunately. Story 44. They always seem to have money to spend on hobbies, alcohol, or other vices, but they never have money to pay the bills, house expenses, or things for the children. Story 45. Going on a trip with friends while leaving your wife alone at home just days after she has given birth. Bonus points if you do so while she is still at the hospital. Story 46. When the spouse dismisses your feelings and concerns and blames you for being overly sensitive. Story 47. He is taking care of the children for a few hours. If you consider the time your spouse spends with the children as babysitting, they are probably a poor spouse and parent. Story 48. Your money is our money. My money is my money. Also, you must ask permission before you buy something unwise. And do not forget, be responsible. Story 49. I hate you. My family hates you. No one likes you. You are not a man. You are a mooch. He is going to grow up to hate you just like the other two. Well, I work, so you do not do anything around here. Story 50. Taking secret videos of your significant other and using them to humiliate them publicly on TikTok. Story 51. Complaining about your spouse to other people, making little critical comments, snide remarks, or fully complaining is not helpful. It is okay to be upset with your partner, or even dislike them for a few days, but good partners support their spouses outside the relationship. Story 52. Abandonment during times of sickness and cheating. My ex started cheating on me weeks after I suffered a severe concussion. That was horrible on many levels. I am still processing the aftermath of that situation. Story 53. Getting very drunk and then standing on your chair during dinner to make fun of them in front of all their friends and family for the time they got teary-eyed when they tried to register themselves into the emergency room for what turned out to be 4 simultaneous kidney stones. Edit. On 2 separate occasions. Story 54. Easy, forgetting big days such as the first date, birthdays, and anniversary, and not doing something special does not have to be expensive but caring. I once filled her car with balloons and a dozen roses on our anniversary when she was at work, or gave her an occasional card when she was feeling down. Story 55. When someone can sit and watch you cry over something they did without feeling any emotion about it. Story 56. My girlfriend went to a summer festival and came back with an interesting story. She said she met multiple unusual entities in her tent and tried to frame it as a spiritual or psychedelic experience. I listened, waiting for her to admit she was joking, but she insisted. Story 57. I got punched in the face this weekend. I did not hit her back. Instead, I drank a lot to get over it while playing Minecraft alone, as she was locked outside for a couple of hours. I let her back in eventually. What was I supposed to do? Hit her back? Story 58. Stealing your husband's boxers to wear as pajamas. Guilty. On a serious note, a spouse who does not work but does nothing around the house all day, just being lazy. They do not even make the hardworking spouse dinner, not even a sandwich. Dishes are never done. Laundry is not washed. Pets do not get fresh food and water. Bedding stays dirty for a long time, and the toilet builds up grime. Sure, people dislike doing certain tasks, but all of those take about 20 minutes to complete, even less if you stay on top of them. Story 59. When my ex-husband and I argued, he would always say, "This is why my family hates you." Or, "You know everyone hates you, right?" He constantly tried to put me down when arguments were not in his favor, trying to get me to believe that no one liked me except him and that he tolerated me. This made me feel very isolated and insecure. I do not think the goal in a relationship is to make your spouse feel bad about themselves or alone. Story 60. Lack of respect. Honestly, any kind of intentional insult outside of a heated argument is a bad sign all around, especially if it happens in front of other people. Do not put up with it. Story 61. Being self-centered, never considering the input of the spouse, always working your input into their life, rejecting and ignoring their goals, and making them support or even prop up your goals. Constantly tell them they are wrong and become upset if they question your approach to anything. Be hypercritical of their every move and word, and immediately and endlessly challenge any kind of correction from them. Story 62. When you refer to watching your own children as childcare. Story 63. Becoming morbidly obese, being selfish, eating a large batch of homemade guacamole not made for you. Story 64. My ex used to tell me, "You are incapable of anything." Anytime I was clumsy or made a mistake. This took quite a while to get over. Story 65. People-pleasing, yet when the spouse has needs, they are on their own. Story 66. My ex would not take me to the hospital after I was injured in a judo match. She said it was not worth the cost. Story 67. I'm a gay man. Basically, my husband would go out clubbing when, in reality, he was selling substances. I didn't know about this until about 3 years later when I found his stash on his side of the mattress. I was cleaning the house and tidying our bed when I heard the rustle of a packet. First, I thought it was the rustle of chips since he had a habit of hoarding snacks, but I saw the white powder and took it out from the mattress. I hid it on my side and waited until he got home. When he came back, the tension was high. He came in with the groceries, planted a kiss on my cheek, and walked to our room. But I grabbed his arm, tears streaming down my face. I said one simple word, "Why?" He told me why. Long story short, he came from an abusive household. His dad would gamble all the money he had and started getting angry at the lack of money. Apparently, his dad said, "I do not care how you get it. Just get me gambling money." He resorted to getting high and selling his body and drugs. After he told me that, I said to him, "You need serious help." I left. The next week, he found divorce papers on the table signed. A simple note next to the papers read, "We are done. I'm taking the house." A few days later, I found him hanging from the doorframe, rope tied around his neck, dead. Story 68. Reminiscing with former partners, especially without disclosing the marriage or mentioning the spouse. Story 69. When you allow your parents to treat your spouse poorly, even when they are in the right. Story 70. Feels like this thread is just listings of domestic violence. Story 71. Your partner is constantly overwhelmed with tasks, and you are just sitting idly. Bonus points if you complain to them for not making time for you. Just help them, and then they will have less to do and more time to spend with you. Story 72. Siding with other people against your spouse, especially in public. Story 73. Shortly after getting married, they introduce you to one of their coworkers as, "This is Annie, my first wife." Story 74. I heard some advice from a coworker. If you complain about your spouse, you either fix the problem with them or leave them. It is not good to gossip behind your partner's back instead of fixing the issue. It does not matter how small the issue is. You need to take responsibility to communicate and tackle the problem. If they do not want to reciprocate and communicate back like an adult, you do not have a good marriage. Story 75. Stress spouse doing most of the chores and child rearing. Story 76. Getting a dog without any input or heads up to the spouse. Not being supportive of time with the spouse's family, such as prioritizing one's own family of origin over the spouse's. Story 77. Speaking negatively about their partner behind their back or to their face in front of others. Assuming their partner exists solely to meet every need and want, while never giving anything in return. Story 78. Well, my girlfriend's friend just visited, and when I was showing her what I had made for our recent anniversary, which was admittedly quite elaborate, she groaned and said, "I should have been a lesbian. My husband has never given me an anniversary gift." My girlfriend and I were like shocked. Story 79. Telling your spouse you are having issues, opening up and letting them know everything on your mind. They say nothing, give you a blank stare, walk away, and never respond, then pretend like nothing was spoken. Story 80. When you have small children and are at the gym every day, but your spouse does not have time away from the children to work out. Story 81. My now ex-husband took me out to dinner for my birthday. Sounds nice, right? Except he wore one of those big birthday cake hats that said, "It's my birthday." He didn't correct the restaurant when they incorrectly, but understandably, assumed it was his birthday and sang him happy birthday. Story 82. This falls into harmful parenting behavior, such as speaking negatively about your partner to your children or encouraging the children to take sides when you and your spouse are in conflict. Disparaging your spouse's interests, especially when they are enthusiastic about something. Story 83. Not horrible. But how do you have a spouse and not know their favorite color, food, or activity? How can someone not know about the person they have committed to? Story 84. I have a coworker who is proud that he has never changed his daughter's diaper. Story 85. My ex would tell me, "I hope you die," when she got mad at me. When she became really upset, she would say how she wanted me to die, such as in a fiery car crash. Story 86. When you refer to caring for your own children as babysitting, throw the whole idea away. Story 87. Playing video games more than you spend with your spouse. Story 88. Paying an adult film performer for sex just after one of your eventually 3 wives gives birth to your child. Story 89. I'm just chiming in to say I hope this gets read by my ex, and thank you all for making me feel valid. Story 90. When the man walks in front of his wife and does not open the door for her or at least wait until she catches up to open the door. Story 91. Back in the days when scams and robocalls were not as prevalent, one of my male friends answered a call from a number he did not recognize. The woman on the other end apologized for dialing a wrong number, and she was so congenial that they had a conversation for a few minutes. Several days later, he received a second call from the same number. He took the call again. This time, it was an angry man demanding to know what my friend had been discussing with his wife. The overbearing man on the other end of the line had already jumped to the worst conclusion possible. Since my friend was good-natured and quick-witted, he used a stereotypical lisp and answered, "Oh, that was nothing. But you sound kind of cute." The angry husband never called again. My friend, who was bisexual, was left thinking what a terrible man that was, worrying about the wife's safety, and hoping he had given the right answer under the circumstances. He probably did. Even hearing this secondhand, it was like hearing an entire bad marriage unfold in less than 5 minutes. Story 92. When they use the term babysitting while talking about parenting their own children. Story 93. They are noticeably absent from family gatherings, celebrations, or important events. Someone who cannot even be bothered to celebrate special moments cannot be counted on to be there in difficult times. Story 94. When most of their communication with their partner is corrective, making fun of them or talking down to them, this is someone who is not in love with you. I am not saying you are perfect. I am just saying they do not love who you are. Story 95. Going on the defense immediately and staying there when they try to communicate their hurt feelings. If your only focus is denying and memorizing, then you never get to validating and eventually finding a solution. Story 96. Constantly posting on Facebook about how great their spouse is and how everything is perfect is a huge red flag that things are not that great. Story 97. Considering your relationship with your spouse as a competition that you have to win. Story 98. I had an ex-girlfriend who used to get mad and punch me when I came home early from work. Later, I found out I had ruined her planned dates with another man. Story 99. Any scornful or disrespectful behavior, especially in front of the children and particularly in public, is unacceptable. My wife and I went grocery shopping a few weeks ago and saw a family several times across different aisles. As we neared the end of the store, the husband returned to their cart with produce, and the wife loudly berated him in public, in front of what were presumably their children. We were horrified. If by chance you are reading this, leave her. Seriously, she has no respect for you and never will, and you will not help the children by staying. Story 100. If you cheat on your spouse, that is usually regarded as a negative. Cheating is a significant sign. Physical abuse is a clear example of being a horrible husband. Killing your spouse is the ultimate example of being a bad spouse. Those three are the biggest signs. There are other smaller signs such as controlling behavior, gaslighting, deliberately undermining them, sabotaging them, and belittling them publicly. Story 101. Work wife or work husband is a no. It is creepy for everyone. Story 102. Being an unemployed, drug-addicted, alcoholic person is straightforward. Story 103. Ones that make you choose between your family, children, and them. Story 104. Leaving your wife, who just got home with your newborn baby, alone with your 2 other toddler-age children, to go to a motocross track for a weekend to ride and race. Story 105. A doctor I saw when pregnant once told me, in complete seriousness, that he and his wife had 2 children and he never changed a diaper. It is such a strange boast. Instantly, I thought, this is a man who will happily take advantage of his wife and thinks he should brag about it while she does all the hard work of raising children. Story 106. My partner cheated on me with a subordinate at work. We tried to work it out. After that, I was never allowed to feel insecure about him working overtime because he was working like a good husband should. He ended up cheating again and physically assaulted me for calling him out about it. We are divorced, thank God. Story 107. I met a friend of a friend the other day. I had no information about him other than through my mutual friend. Within the first 15 minutes of the conversation, I realized his fiancée did not make a lot of money. He took my first impression and spent most of the time talking negatively about his girlfriend, saying she works in a nonprofit organization, does not earn enough money, and is always broke. I thought this guy is not a good spouse because I would never imagine meeting someone and the first thing I tell them is that my wife works a low-paying job and is struggling financially. Story 108. Saying repeatedly at dinner parties, I am a terrible husband, as a joke is inappropriate. He is unfaithful and extremely verbally abusive. Story 109. Lack of support includes not supporting your spouse's goals, wants, dreams, desires, and plans. It involves talking down to your spouse, criticizing their looks, style, weight, taste in books, music, and television. This refers to serious criticism or elitism, not light teasing. It also includes downplaying their accomplishments, isolating them from their friends or hobbies, withholding affection, emotionally manipulating to get what one wants from the other person, complete lack of honesty or accountability, and unwillingness to see the other's point of view or take responsibility for their part in an issue. Additionally, unhealthy ideas of gender roles, toxic masculinity, unhealthy jealousy, and insecurities that are refused to be addressed contribute to the problem. I am incredibly blessed. I married a man who is an incredible partner in every way, but I have witnessed the above too many times in our friends' relationships. Story 110. Always needing to be away from their spouse can go either way or both ways. If you cannot get along, then you are terrible together, even if you are not terrible people individually. Story 111. Speaking negatively about them to friends, family, or coworkers. There is a clear difference between someone who likes their spouse and is venting versus someone who has no respect for them. Story 112. I was charged at, first balled up, and screamed at 2 inches from my face after asking him to speak up and not mumble under his breath. Right before I told him I was done, 2 years after that night, we were trying to work it out, even though I was already checked out. Brought up how much it scared me and that I never really moved past it since we didn't talk about it. He mocked me by saying in a very sarcastic, high-pitched tone, as if mocking someone crying, "Since you were so scared of me," while putting air quotes with his hands at the same time. Story 113. I've never been someone who likes airing dirty laundry or speaking ill of a loved one behind their back. So it always makes me a bit uncomfortable when people are really blasé about bad-mouthing their significant other to me. Sometimes they sound like legitimate gripes, but if I'm hearing about it every week, then clearly you are not trying to find a solution with this person and you sound like you don't really want to be with them. I was acquaintances with a guy years ago who was in a really tumultuous on-off long-term relationship, and he always used to complain about his girlfriend to our friend group. At one point, he went out with us and said it might be over for good and was expressing regret at maybe having pushed her away permanently. Over a couple of weeks, they ended up talking things out and getting back together to his relief. Like a day after he told me about them reconciling, I was with him, and he was already complaining about her again. That was when I started tuning him out. Story 114. They manipulate everything you say and constantly belittle you in front of others with their "I told you so" remarks. Story 115. Someone who says they need a boys' weekend or girls' weekend to get away. Story 116. Correcting or controlling your partner every now and then. Story 117. When you married the widow next door who had been married 7 times before. Story 118. Thank you to all the internet strangers. Here I am, just checking off all the things my future ex-wife is doing. Story 119. I used to get, "Do you know how many women would want me?" while I was at home raising his and our children. Story 120. Airing a spouse's private issues and dirty laundry in public is a sign of a terrible spouse because it represents a profound betrayal of trust. A healthy marriage is a private partnership where couples can be vulnerable without fear. When one partner broadcasts these personal matters, they cause deep humiliation and embarrassment and use their partner's weaknesses as a weapon. This behavior is a form of emotional abuse that shows an inability to solve problems privately and constructively, creating a relationship built on fear rather than safety. This public spectacle shows a complete disregard for the spouse's dignity and the sanctity of the relationship, making it impossible to maintain trust and respect. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.